Ever thought about packing your bags and moving into the controlled chaos that is New York City? Today, I'm revealing the top 10 things I wish someone had told me before moving here. I moved to New York in October of 2011, and I didn't think it would be that big of an adjustment growing up across the Hudson in North Jersey. Boy, was I wrong. And I was a much different person back then in my 20s and single. Now I'm married, a dad, and almost 40, and you really gain some perspective in all that time. The first thing I wish I knew was that your friendships won't last. I didn't realize it then, but New York is one of the most transient places on earth. You'll have friends come and go through your life like a subway train just coming through the station, some lasting longer than others. In the first 5 years living in the city, of the dozens of friends I made, only one still lives here. Even my twin brother, who was my first roommate for 8 years, he doesn't live here anymore. I wish I could have savored some of those moments with a lot of these friends for just a little bit longer, had some deeper conversations, just one more beer together. You don't have to live below 14th Street in Manhattan. When I first moved here, I fell into the trap that so many 20-somethings fall for, and that's thinking the center of the universe is Lower Manhattan. While I don't necessarily regret the decision, I think I sacrificed a lot, spending a ton on rent, living in a very small apartment to accomplish that. My priorities were not in the right place. You do not have to live within a 5-minute walk of 50 bars to have the New York experience. I also think the city's changed a lot in the last decade. You can find many of the same things in every neighborhood. You're looking for a ramen spot, birria tacos, a beer garden. It's just about everywhere. If you're moving to New York and you're a 20 or 30-something-year-old single person, you don't have to live in Greenwich or East Village or Lower East Side or even Manhattan to have the same experience that I had, and that is one thing I'm certain of. This is one of the sneakiest things that most newcomers to New York don't think about, and that's taxes. You see, living in this city has an extra tax burden. You're not just paying New York State tax, but you are paying a New York City tax on your income. All city residents' income, no matter where it is earned, is subject to New York City personal income tax. Non-residents of New York City are not liable for New York City personal income tax. Even if you live here just 6 months, you still have to pay extra taxes. And this rate varies from 3 to 3.8%. So if you're single and make $150,000 a year, you pay $5,600 a year in city tax, in addition to the $8,400 you're paying the state, for a grand total of $14,120 of state and city tax at the end of the year. Now, if you live across the Hudson in Hoboken, New Jersey, it's a little bit cheaper. Your state tax rate would be $7,365. With no city tax, you'd save $6,755 a year to live 10 minutes away by PATH train. But then again, you're living in Jersey. So is it worth it? Tell me. I would never get an apartment in New York without this one thing. And if you've never lived in a global city, this might sound a little bit strange, but if you have, you'll understand. My last apartment in the Village, where I lived for 9 years, every single window in there stared directly at another building. And I would never again rent an apartment where the room I spend the majority of my time does not have a view of the street or at least a backyard, because it can actually take a toll on your mental health not knowing what's going on out there. It's like being backstage at Broadway's best show and never actually seeing the performance. I could only tell if it was raining if I could hear the raindrops on my air conditioner outside. So the next time you look at an amazing apartment that's been sitting vacant for a week and hasn't been snatched up, check what the views are like, and if you don't have a view, you may have your answer, and that's something I would never sacrifice again. And you'll be shocked how often you will run into apartments like this, especially in Manhattan. There's more fulfilling things to do than party. And look, I get it. If you move to New York and you're young, you want to go out, you have so much nightlife at your fingertips. And I may have taken it to a little bit of an extreme my first year. Now, I lived 1 minute from Bleecker Street. But in hindsight, I think I would have spent more time learning the culture of the city. I don't know, going to things like Open House New York or going to museums more often. There's a lot more resources now on the internet than when I moved here as well. There's so many Instagram accounts. You could find cool things going on. You don't just have to go to bars all the time and spend all your money, because believe me, going out a lot is a very expensive hobby here. I would have been more knowledgeable on renting realities. Now, many newcomers to the city don't realize the leverage they have as a tenant if they're paying on time and not causing disturbances. I recall a conversation I had with my building manager after the first year when they wanted to raise my rent $100. Hello? Hey, how are you? Look, I just got the notice in the mail. You want to raise the rent $100. Look, I was thinking we've been really good tenants this year. Could you keep the rent the same? That's funny. You know why that's funny? Because if I put your apartment up tomorrow, I would have a line down the block looking to rent it. But nice try. Okay. I understand, thank you. This is how I would have responded to him if he had messed with me like that. But nice try. Okay, yeah, I mean, I understand, but if you want to get a new tenant in, you're gonna have to spend time painting the place. You're gonna have to pay your brokers. You're gonna have to go through all those processes. Why don't we just meet at $50 more a month? Now, the landlord may have still said no to that, but if he said yes, I would have saved $600 that year. Instead, my rent went up $100 every single year, and I never fought it once. Here's another one most people don't know about. The landlord must paint occupied apartments in multiple dwellings every 3 years. I never requested a repaint in 9 years living there, and it was the least I could have done, the least I could have asked for after all of those rent hikes. I would have brushed up on stuff like that, and it's all listed on the tenant's rights and responsibilities page on the NYC.gov website. I want some Shake Shack bad, dude. I don't know about you. Thinking about it. Can I get a single shack burger? Thank you. Oh, it smells good. One thing I wish I knew before moving to New York was how good Shake Shack was. This is the original at Madison Square Park. I've just got to say, it hits the spot every single time. Resiliency is key. New Yorkers are tough, but you probably already knew that. Had a bad date? Oh well, there's a lot of single people here. Didn't get your dream apartment? There'll be 50 more listings tomorrow. Lost your job? Create your own. That's what I did with this YouTube channel. Resiliency is something that runs in the tap water here. You're gonna meet a lot of resilient people, a lot of inspiring people, and it can definitely motivate you. And it wasn't something that I really thought about or realized when I first moved here. You can eat around the world. Now, everybody knows about New York's famous restaurants and the Michelin star stuff, and we're talking beyond pizza, hot dogs, bagels, the obvious foods. But just by doing this YouTube channel, I have gotten the opportunity to explore different cultures through their food, and that's something I never would have been able to do unless I had amazing friends taking me on things like a Bengali food crawl. Now, I was somebody that grew up being afraid of hot, spicy food, but that does not have to define you. You can always change. In my 30s, I started to get into spicy stuff, and now I absolutely love it. So let New York inspire you. You can eat around the world so easily here, and it's something that I really took for granted my first few years and didn't care about, and now I'm all in. Find your neighborhood spots first. In a city with endless options, finding a local spot where everyone knows your name is invaluable. Whether it's a coffee shop, a diner, a small store, having that familiar place to go where the staff recognizes you, it makes you feel like you live in a much smaller city or town. For example, I had a bodega around the corner from me in the Village, and I went there enough where they would know my sandwich order before it even came out of my mouth. I'm talking about that kind of familiarity, and I don't think I sought that out as quickly as I should have. If you move to New York, get to know those local neighborhood businesses first. You can find nature in New York. Now, when I first moved here, I thought the extent of my nature would be Washington Square Park or a beautiful park like this, Madison Square Park. But boy, was I wrong. After, seeing places like Prospect Park in Brooklyn, Wave Hill in the Bronx, I have been absolutely blown away by the sheer beauty of this city. It's just not something that tourists really go out of their way to look for, but I think it's so important for locals and newcomers to experience it. Getting away from the urban jungle and the cityscapes or whatever your neighborhood looks like, so important. And I'll add just weekend getaways every couple of months if you can afford it. So good for your mental health. I've got some bonuses, and this first one, pretty obvious, cost of living. I didn't realize just how expensive it was living in New York until many years later when other expenses started to sneak in, like, even childcare, $2,500 to $3,000 a month for daycare, $25 to $30 an hour to get a babysitter. I always joke with people that unless I'm going to Switzerland, which I did once, I generally feel a lot wealthier anywhere else I travel but New York. I think I got so used to the high cost of living here that going somewhere and spending, I don't know, $12 to $15 for an entree even has begun to feel cheap. The cost of living, I think I underestimated it just a little bit. I didn't realize how important it was to learn to cook when I moved here. Now, when I was single and living with my twin brother for 8 years, we actually would alternate cooking. And the amount of money that we saved, even cooking 3 to 4 dinners a week, well, I think it was a lot. And many people don't realize if you can just learn to cook simple stuff, it will save you a fortune on DoorDash, Uber Eats, and going out to restaurants nonstop. You need to embrace change. Now, when I used to travel a lot more, I would always joke that when I got back to the village, there would be at least one restaurant that just happened to close. So remember what I said about losing a lot of your friends? The same thing's gonna happen with some of your favorite businesses. Over the course of time, it's just the nature of New York and how expensive it is for businesses and restaurants to survive. Don't get too attached to your favorite restaurant because it might not be there when you get back from your next vacation. Now that you know what mistakes to avoid when moving here, you might be wondering what's the real price tag of living in New York City? Well, in this video, we break down the cost of eating, breathing, and living in this metropolis. Head here next.